The drama surrounding Mona Kimura doesn't begin inside a ring, under bright lights, or to the sound of a roaring crowd. It begins much earlier in a quiet Japanese childhood, long before anyone could imagine that this smiling young woman would one day dismantle opponents with a style so unusual it borders on surreal. Today, she's known as the undefeated fighter who seems to have borrowed her moveset from a video game, real-life Chun-Li, who fights as if her legs were weapons with minds of their own. But the truth behind her rise is far more layered, disciplined, and fascinating than the highlight clips suggest. Mona Kimura was born on April 12, 2001, in Japan, and like many great fighters, her journey didn't begin with spectacle. There was no grand prophecy, no early fame, no viral moments. Instead, there was routine, repetition, and an almost stubborn dedication to training. From the 4th grade all the way through her entrance into university, Mona trained in boxing. Day after day, year after year, she learned the fundamentals of distance, timing, defense, and composure. Boxing taught her how to read an opponent's shoulders, how to slip a punch by inches, how to stay calm when leather comes flying at your face. It taught her patience, and more importantly, it taught her confidence. By the time she was 18 years old, that dedication paid off in a very real way. Mona Kimura became the champion of Japan in boxing, a title that alone would have been enough to define most careers. She wasn't just good, she was elite. Her hands were sharp, her movement efficient, her understanding of the ring far beyond her years. In 2022, she represented Japan at the Women's World Championship, standing on an international stage as a product of years of disciplined boxing education. At that point, her path seemed clear. Boxing was her foundation, her identity, and her proven domain. And yet, this is where the story takes its first unexpected turn. Despite her success, Mona made a choice that surprised many around her. She stepped away from the familiar world of boxing and signed a contract with the Crush promotion, committing herself to kickboxing, a sport widely considered more brutal, more chaotic, and less forgiving. To outsiders, it looked like a risk. Why abandon a discipline where you've already conquered your nation? Why step into a sport where legs, knees, and kicks add layers of danger and unpredictability? For Mona, however, it wasn't about abandoning boxing. It was about expanding beyond it. What followed was not a gradual transition, but a reinvention. Very quickly, Mona Kamura began to attract attention for a reason that had little to do with her record and everything to do with how she fought. While most fighters blend hands and legs in relatively predictable patterns, Mona began doing something different. Something unsettling. Something mesmerizing. She started fighting almost exclusively with her legs. Not as occasional strikes, not as setup tools, but as her primary language of violence. Her kicks weren't just powerful. They were precise, frequent, deployed with the casual rhythm of jabs. Her legs became her arms. Observers struggled to make sense of it. Commentators compared her to Chun-Li from Street Fighter, and the comparison stuck. Not just because of the flurries of kicks, but because Mona leaned into the image with confidence and humor. She understood the visual impact of her style. She understood how rare it was. And she understood how unsettling it felt to face an opponent whose legs never seemed to reset, never seemed to rest, and never seemed to give you a safe moment to step forward. What made it even more shocking was her demeanor. Mona Kimura smiled. She smiled before fights, during fights, and after fights. She smiled while landing strikes that would fold most fighters. She smiled while hopping effortlessly on one leg after an opponent grabbed the other. There was no visible malice, no rage, no intimidation tactics, just calm, joy, and absolute control. Her legs themselves became a subject of discussion. Unpredictable, fast, and disciplined, they moved not like traditional kicks, but like extensions of a boxer's jab. They interrupted opponents mid-step. They punished hesitation. They punished aggression. They existed constantly in the opponent's space, forcing reactions before strategies could even form. In a strange way, it all traced back to childhood stories of her parents having her stand on one leg for long periods of time. A simple exercise that unknowingly laid the groundwork for balance and control that would later define her career. When Mona entered her first professional kickboxing fights, many assumed they had already figured her out. She uses her legs. That's her thing. Take that away, and she's exposed. The assumption felt logical, almost comforting. Fighters crave predictability, and analysts were quick to label her as a one-dimensional specialist. Her first 2 fights leaned heavily on leg work, reinforcing the illusion that she was readable. Then came her 3rd fight. Whoa, and with it, the collapse of that narrative. Mona didn't just adapt. She evolved. Her official debut fight took place on November 16, 2024, against fellow Japanese fighter Ai Ogawara. From the opening seconds, Mona did something that immediately disrupted expectations. Instead of opening with kicks, she opened with jabs. Clean, sharp, boxing jabs that reminded everyone exactly where her roots lay. When she finally attempted to load a kick and Ogawara managed to grab her leg, Mona briefly found herself on the canvas. For a moment, it looked like validation for her critics. Legs can be caught. Legs can be punished. But what happened next told a different story. Mona popped back up, hopping effortlessly on one leg, balanced, composed, almost playful. She took a small hit during the exchange, but it barely registered. She responded with a solid hook, reasserting control instantly. When Ogawara rushed into a clinch, hoping to slow the pace, Mona simply pushed her away, sending her to the canvas with an almost dismissive motion. Frustration began to creep in. Ogawara landed a few solid hooks to Mona's head, moments that might have rattled a lesser fighter. Mona didn't flinch. She calmly returned fire with a left straight followed by a right to the jaw. Ogawara dropped in a knockdown, visibly stunned, unsure of what had just happened. She managed to get back up, but the momentum had shifted permanently. Mona took the initiative and never let go. Another hook landed. Another clinch attempt failed. And then, in a moment that seemed almost cinematic, Ogawara ran directly into Mona's right hook, collapsing into a brutal knockout. As the crowd erupted, Mona smiled once again, calm and cheerful, as if she had just completed a routine sparring session. The message was clear. She could kick, she could punch, and she could end fights however she chose.